Welcome everybody who can hear us. We'll be beginning very, very shortly, just waiting for a few other people to join us. Okay, well, we might get moving. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's CBD Emergency Management Toolkit Masterclass. I'd like to quickly introduce the team from Resilient Services. I'm Bree Chapman, I'm the Director of Operations at Resilient Services. For those who may not be familiar with us, we work with organisations to strengthen their resilience and preparedness, helping them build practical capability to prepare for, respond to and recover from any sort of a business disruption or emergency. Joining me online today is Sammy Harris, our brand manager and one of our organisational resilience consultants. Sammy has been closely involved in this project and will be co-presenting with me today. We also have Riley Ramilton, one of our other organisational resilience consultants, supporting us behind the scenes today. Riley will be keeping an eye on the Q&A throughout the session and helping us keep everything running smoothly. It's so great to have you all with us today, so thank you for being here. Before we commence, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we're all joining from today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd like to acknowledge the cultural significance of the artwork created on screen by Stacey Payton, who's a modern Wiradjuri artist, and this was planned specifically for Resilient Services, our journey and hers intertwined. I just want to quickly cover a few of the housekeeping items for us today. So we do ask that microphones remain muted throughout the session to help minimise background noise. Today's masterclass is also being recorded and we'll share a copy of the recording and presentation slides following the session. Throughout the masterclass, we'll share relevant links and resources in the chat. The chat isn't going to actually be actively monitored today for questions. So if you do have a question, we ask you to utilise the Q&A section to submit questions as we go. As you'll see on the next slide, we have a fairly packed agenda today. So while we may not have an opportunity to address every question during the session, please continue to submit them through the Q&A section. And if we don't get to your question today, we'll personally follow up after today's session. If you'd prefer to remain anonymous, you can email your question directly to Sammy at sharris@resilientservices.com.au and we'll pop that email address in the chat for you as well. Finally, all resources referenced throughout today's session are also available through the Better Buildings Partnership website. Today's session is designed to introduce the toolkit, explain how it was developed, and most importantly, demonstrate how organisations can use it to strengthen emergency preparedness across commercial buildings. We'll begin by providing some background to the project and the research that informed the toolkit. We'll then introduce the Emergency Preparedness Maturity Assessment tool and demonstrate how it helps organisations identify priorities and navigate the toolkit. From there, we'll work through several practical examples showing how different toolkit resources can be applied to strengthen emergency preparedness in practice. We'll also hear from our guest speakers who will discuss the Sydney CBD safety subplan and the important role building owners and managers can play in supporting coordinated emergency management across the precinct. Finally, we'll look at the next phase of the project, including opportunities to implement the toolkit, contribute to future case studies, and continue strengthening preparedness across the sector. Before we look at the toolkit itself, it's worth taking a step back and understanding why this project was undertaken. In recent years, we've seen a number of incidents across Australia, including the Bondi attacks, severe weather events, protests, and other complex disruptions. These events have reinforced that emergency preparedness is no longer just about fire and evacuation. Building owners and managers are increasingly expected to make timely decisions, coordinate with multiple stakeholders, and respond effectively to a much broader range of emergency scenarios. These challenges were also reflected through the 2024 Sydney CBD Emergency Management Forum. A link to this forum can be found in the chat function, and discussions within the Better Buildings Partnership Community Resilience Working Group, where members consistently identified the need for practical resources to strengthen emergency preparedness across commercial buildings. In response, the City of Sydney, Better Buildings Partnership and Resilient Services partnered to develop the CBD Emergency Management Toolkit. Rather than creating another compliance document, the project set out to develop practical resources that complement existing emergency management arrangements and help organisations build capability over time. This project has progressed through 4 key stages: research, consultation, development, and now implementation. It began with a comprehensive baseline review, drawing on Australian standards, legislation, the Sydney CBD Safety Subplan, industry guidance, ESG, which is Environment, Social and Governance frameworks, and resilience frameworks, including GRESB, Green Star and WELL, as well as Australian and international case studies. This established the evidence base for the project and helped us understand how expectations for emergency preparedness are evolving across the commercial property sector. Building on that research, we undertook workshops, surveys, and consultation with BBP members and emergency services. This helped validate the research and, importantly, identify the challenges organisations are experiencing in practice. Those findings directly informed the development of the toolkit, including the Emergency Preparedness Maturity Assessment, practical templates, checklists, and guidance designed to complement existing emergency management arrangements. Today marks the beginning of the implementation phase. This masterclass is about showing you how the toolkit is intended to be used in practice and supporting organisations as they begin applying the resources within their own buildings. Looking ahead, the project will continue to evolve through implementation with future case studies and shared experiences, helping to demonstrate practical application and support continuous improvement. So what did the research and consultation tell us? 4 consistent themes emerged, and these ultimately shaped the direction of the toolkit. Firstly, organisations recognised that effective emergency management relies on strong communication and coordination, not only within individual buildings, but also with tenants, neighbouring organisations and emergency services. Secondly, there was broad agreement that preparedness now extends beyond traditional fire and evacuation arrangements. Organisations are increasingly preparing for a wider range of complex and evolving emergency scenarios. We also heard that tenant engagement and exercising remain ongoing challenges. Many organisations have emergency plans in place, but there are fewer opportunities to build awareness, test arrangements, and validate that they will work in practice. Finally, stakeholders consistently ask for practical resources that could be easily adopted within emergency existing arrangements, rather than creating additional compliance documentation. Collectively, these findings reinforced one key message. Emergency preparedness is not simply about having documented plans. It depends on how effectively people, processes, and organisations work together when an incident occurs. These findings became the foundation for the toolkit, shaping both the capabilities it focuses on and the practical resources that have been developed. Importantly, preparedness doesn't stop at the boundaries of an individual building. During a significant incident, effective emergency management also depends on how organisations communicate, coordinate, and work together across the broader CBD. To explore that perspective, I'm pleased to welcome Ross Edwards, Emergency Planning Manager with the City of Sydney, and Ariana Deer, Regional Emergency Management Officer with the New South Wales Police Force. Ross and Ariana will provide an overview of the Sydney CBD Safety Subplan and how it supports coordinated emergency management across the precinct, followed by a short panel discussion exploring the role building owners and managers play within those broader arrangements. Ross and Ariana, thank you both for joining us today. I'll now hand over to you.
Well, thank you, Bree, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to provide an overview of the Sydney CBD Safety Subplan. My colleague and co-presenter has already been introduced, but welcome, Ariana, and as our Sydney Metropolitan Regional Emergency Management Officer. But before I talk through the changes, it's worth noting that the revised plan was developed through a significant multi-agency review process. Responsibility for the plan was handed over from the New South Wales Police Emergency Management Unit, now the Incident and Emergency Management Command, IEMC, in September 2018. A dedicated working group was established to review both the supporting arrangements and ultimately the plan itself. The review involved extensive consultation across local, regional and state emergency management stakeholders, including New South Wales Police, Disaster Welfare, Transport for New South Wales, Public Information Specialists and the City of Sydney. The process included engagement with the State Emergency Operations Controller, 6 stakeholder working group meetings, 2 specialist subgroup workshops, and a review of interstate CBD safety and evacuation frameworks. The result is a modernised plan that reflects contemporary emergency management practices, strengthens coordination across agencies, and provides greater flexibility in managing major incidents within the Sydney CBD. The Sydney CBD Safety Subplan is a subplan of the New South Wales State Emergency Management Plan and sets out the preparation, response, and immediate recovery arrangements for emergencies inside incidents occurring in the Sydney CBD. Importantly, today I'll focus on why the plan was reviewed, what has changed, how the updated approach supports safer and more effective responses, and importantly, what it means for commercial property owners and managers. The key message is that the Sydney CBD Safety Subplan recognises that evacuation is just one of several options available during a major incident. The focus is on protecting people through the most appropriate response while maintaining the functioning of the city wherever possible. Next slide, please. The revised plan moves away from a traditional evacuation-centric approach. Instead, it provides a decision-making framework that allows agencies to apply the most appropriate response strategy, depending on the nature of the event. The result is improved coordination, clearer governance, and more targeted responses. For commercial property owners and managers, these improvements provide greater clarity about how decisions may be made during a major CBD incident and how organisations can align their own arrangements with a broader response. Next slide, please. So why does this matter? Well, large-scale CBD incidents are rare, but when they do occur, clarity of decision-making becomes critical. Major cities require a range of response options rather than just assuming evacuation is always the answer. The review focused on ensuring decisions can be made quickly, consistently, and proportionately. In the Sydney CBD, we experience everything from severe weather and infrastructure disruptions through to public safety incidents and major transport impacts. Different incidents require different responses. A large-scale evacuation can sometimes introduce additional risks or create avoidable disruption. Next slide, please. This slide captures the transformation. The most important change is that shift from asking, how do we evacuate, to what is the safest and most effective response option. For example, asking thousands of people to evacuate simultaneously may not always be the safest option. In some circumstances, remaining safely inside a building or sheltering in place may provide a better outcome. Next slide, please. Historically, large-scale evacuation concepts assumed broader geographic impacts. The revised sector approach allows agencies to focus on affected areas. This means fewer people are impacted unnecessarily, and resources can be directed to where they are needed most. Many organisations may never have considered which CBD sector they sit within. Understanding your sector helps you understand how information, movement, and response activities may occur during a major incident. Next slide, please. The identified assembly areas support controlled movement of people when evacuation is required. Importantly, these locations are part of a coordinated CBD-wide approach and are linked to transport, welfare, and other operational arrangements. For building operators, this reinforces the importance of understanding not only your own assembly and evacuation procedures, but also how they relate to broader CBD arrangements. Next slide, please. A recurring challenge during complex emergencies is understanding around roles and authority. The revised plan establishes a clear activation and governance framework. What matters most for organisations is that agencies are operating from a common operating framework. That means clearer decisions, better coordination, and more consistent messaging during a rapidly changing situation. Next slide, please. I'll just hand over to Ariana for the next couple of slides. Thanks, Ariana.
I haven't got the governance one, that's you, sorry.
Sorry. Oh, apologies.
Yeah.
Apologies. So that's the next slide, please. That was the governance and activation slide that I just spoke to.
Thank you very much. So the CBD EWS continues to play an important role in coordinating the public messaging. As the technology upgrade reaches its completion, our attention now is turning to the governance arrangements needed to support the new capability. The system is designed to complement the existing communication channels and not replace them. The building owners still remain responsible for communicating with their own occupants and their tenants. Next slide, please. Most people pass through the CBD every day without noticing this system. This infrastructure becomes a key communication channel during a major incident, and it enables a rapid dissemination of critical safety information across the CBD. What you see on the left-hand side are the EWS speakers, and they have 98 locations across the city. The image on the right-hand side is a variable message sign, a VMS, and they are located across 13 sites across the city. Next slide, please. Back to Ross.
Thanks, Ariana. Okay, so for BBP members, the objective is not to rewrite existing emergency plans. Really, the objective is to build awareness of how your arrangements interact with the broader CBD response framework. This is where the Emergency Management Toolkit becomes particularly valuable. It helps organisations assess whether their plans, communications, relationships, and decision-making processes support better, broader level coordination. Next slide, please. So in closing, a resilient CBD is built one organisation at a time. Every building that understands its role, maintains strong preparedness arrangements, and can make informed decisions during an incident contributes to safer outcomes for the entire precinct. Every prepared building contributes to a prepared CBD. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ross and Ariana, for taking us through the Sydney CBD safety subplan and providing that broader context around how emergency management is coordinated across the CBD. We'll now move into a short panel discussion and explore some of those arrangements in practice. We're going to look at the role individual building owners and managers play during a significant incident, how coordination works across the Sydney CBD, what effective collaboration looks like before and during an emergency, and finally, the key advice Ross and Ariana would give organisations looking to strengthen their preparedness. I'm now going to stop sharing the presentation for a moment to bring the focus back to our speakers, and we'll be starting with the role of individual buildings. So Ross, when a significant incident occurs in the Sydney CBD, what role do individual building owners and managers play in supporting the overall emergency response?
Yeah, thanks, Sammy. Well, I guess the first thing that I'd emphasise is that emergency management is not only an individual, but a shared responsibility. Emergency services will lead the response, but really the effectiveness of that response is heavily influenced by how prepared individual organisations are. Building owners and managers have a critical role in protecting their occupants, implementing emergency procedures, and providing timely information to tenants, and making informed decisions based on official advice. In practice, that might mean initiating evacuation or shelter arrangements, accounting for their occupants, supporting people with additional needs, maintaining communication with tenants and neighbouring buildings, and sharing relevant information with responding agencies. What we typically see and consistently see during major incidents is that organisations with clear plans, trained personnel, and established communication arrangements place less demand on emergency services during that critical early stage. They typically respond confidently while allowing responders to focus on managing the broader incident. Ultimately, every well-prepared building contributes to a safer and more coordinated CBD-wide approach.
Thanks, Russ. Ariana, during a major incident, what does that coordination actually look like in practice? And where do building owners and managers fit within those arrangements?
Thank you. Yes. So one of the strengths of the Sydney CBD safety subplan is that it provides a framework for coordinating many organisations involved in a major incident. So the goal is to create a common operating picture, and it ensures that the decisions that are aligned across agency stakeholders. So for building owners and managers, it doesn't mean becoming part of the emergency command structure. Your role is to remain focused on your building, your occupants, and your business operations while staying connected to official information and directions. So coordination in practice looks like organisations receiving consistent information, understanding the broader context of the incident, and making decisions that complement what is occurring across the precinct. An example is, if a transportation network is disrupted, multiple buildings may need to support extended shelter-in-place arrangements. If a large-scale evacuation is occurring, building operators need to understand how their actions fit within those wider movements of people. The better organisations understand the subplan and their place within it, and more effectively supports a coordinated response across the CBD.
Thank you very much. Ross, back to you, I think, for this one. What does effective collaboration look like during a major incident, and what can organisations do before an incident to strengthen those relationships?
Yeah, thank you. Effective collaboration is rarely created on the day. It's usually the result of long-standing relationships, trusted communication channels that have already been established. The organisations that work well together during a crisis generally know each other beforehand. They've participated in exercises together, they've attended forums together, exchanged contact details, and discussed how they might support one another during a major disruption. During an incident, collaboration often involves sharing situational awareness, providing updates on building impacts, understanding emerging risks, and aligning decisions where appropriate. One practical step organisations can take is to build relationships beyond their own building, get to know neighbouring property managers, local emergency management stakeholders, and relevant government and emergency services contacts. Another is to actively participate in emergency exercises and other preparedness activities and initiatives. These activities help to identify gaps before an incident occurs and create the professional networks that become invaluable during a real event. When communication channels already exist, information typically moves faster and decisions tend to be better informed. Thanks,
Ross. And Ariana, final question. What are the most common preparedness challenges you see, and what is the single most important thing organisations can do to strengthen their preparedness before the next significant incident?
Thank you. Well, there's a few different recurring challenges that appear across many organisations. So really it's the uncertainty around roles and responsibilities. Organisations may have plans in place, but people are not always clear on who makes the decision, who communicates with stakeholders, and who coordinates that response activities during an incident. Another common challenge is maintaining current information, contact list, tenant details, contractor information, and escalation arrangements. And they can quickly become outdated, and this will reduce the effectiveness when they're needed the most. We also see organisations with well-documented procedures that have never really been tested. So having a plan is important, but confidence comes from exercising those arrangements, understanding how they will work in this fast-moving, high-pressure situation. So the key question is not whether a plan exists, but how do people know how to apply it when circumstances change and information is incomplete? what we see in organisations that perform best during emergencies tends to share a few common characteristics. So clear roles and responsibilities, current and accessible contact information, strong communication arrangements, and leaders who are comfortable making decisions, effective situational awareness processes, strong relationship with neighbouring organisations, and as Ross has pointed out before, established relationships with emergency services and emergency management providers. There's a little saying in my world, know a friend before you phone a friend. A commitment to regularly reviewing and discussing and exercising your plan. So if we look at preparedness, it's less about having this perfect plan and more about having that capability, the adaptability and the confidence to respond effectively when conditions change. These are the organisations that have practiced, tested their arrangements and built strong relationships before the emergency occurs. So if we look at the resource such as the CBD Emergency Management Toolkit, it can be used to support that process. So by helping organisations assess their preparedness, strengthen their capability, and then contribute to a more resilient CBD of Sydney. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you to both of you for sharing your insights and providing such a practical perspective on preparedness and coordination across the Sydney CBD. Ross and Ariana, we really do appreciate you joining us today. We will now turn our attention to the toolkit and look at how organisations can put these principles into practice. So bear with me, please, as I share the presentation again. Okay. Apologies. Okay, so I would now like to introduce the CBD Emergency Management Toolkit. The toolkit is a practical collection of resources designed to support organisations at different stages of emergency preparedness. It complements existing arrangements through templates, checklists, and guidance that can be adapted to suit your organisation and operating environment. One of the important things to emphasise is that there's no expectation that every organisation will use every resource or implement the toolkit all at once. You might start with one particular gap or priority, use the resources that are relevant to you, and then build on that over time. The toolkit is organised across 6 preparedness domains. They are governance, planning, collaboration, exercising, training, and continuous improvement, allowing organisations to focus their effort where it is the most useful. The complete toolkit is available through the Better Buildings Partnership website, and we'll share that link in the chat today. So with that flexibility in mind, the next question is, how do you decide where to start? And that's where the maturity assessment comes in. Rather than working through the toolkit from start to finish, we recommend beginning with the Emergency Preparedness Maturity Assessment tool. The assessment provides a structured way to understand your current preparedness capability across each of the 6 toolkit domains. It uses the good, better, best maturity model to help benchmark current practice, identify strengths, and highlight areas where further improvement may be beneficial. Importantly, this isn't an audit or a pass or fail exercise. It's intended to help organisations understand where they are now and prioritise where to focus their efforts. Once completed, the assessment results help guide you toward the toolkit resources most relevant to your organisation. So let's have a look how that might look in practice. This example here shows the collaboration domain within the maturity assessment. Each of the 6 domains contains a series of practical questions that ask organisations to reflect on their current emergency preparedness arrangements. For each question, the user selects the response that best reflects current practice. These responses are then automatically mapped to the good, better, best maturity model in the background, so there is no manual scoring required. In this example, all 10 collaboration questions have been completed. You can see that some areas are already well established, while others, such as engagement with neighbouring facilities, shared communication pathways, and collaboration with transport operators, present opportunities for improvement. Together, these responses produce a collaboration score of 33% and a maturity rating of good. The value here is not the number on its own. The assessment helps the organisation understand why a domain has scored the way it has and where practical improvement could be focused. Once all 6 domains are completed, the results are brought together into the overall dashboard, giving organisations a clear view of strengths, priority areas, and where to focus next. So let's have a look at what the overall dashboard looks like. This is where the assessment becomes especially useful. So rather than looking at individual questions, the dashboard allows the organisation to step back and see its preparedness profile across all 6 domains. In this example, there are some clear strengths, but there are also several areas where further effort could deliver meaningful improvement. Collaboration stands out as the lowest scoring domain, with exercising and planning also sitting below the stronger performing areas. So that gives this organisation a much clearer basis for prioritising its next steps. Instead of trying to improve everything at once, it can focus attention to the areas where there is the greatest opportunities to strengthen capability. In this case, collaboration becomes the logical starting point, while exercising and planning may form the next areas of focus. The next step is then to translate those priorities into practical actions, and that's where the toolkit at a glance comes in. So now that we've seen what the maturity assessment can tell us, the next step is understanding how to use those results to navigate the toolkit. On your screen at the moment, the toolkit at a glance is essentially your navigation guide. It brings the 6 preparedness domains and the supporting resources together in one place, so you can see what is available and identify the resources most relevant to your organisation. As we mentioned earlier, the intention is not to work through the toolkit from beginning to end or to complete every tool, template and checklist. Different organisations will have different levels of maturity, different operating environments, and different priorities. You may only need 1 or 2 resources initially, while another organisation may choose to focus on several areas at the same time. This is where the maturity assessment becomes particularly useful once you have identified your strengths and priority areas for improvement. You can use the toolkit at a glance to move directly to the relevant domain and consider which resources could help address the gaps you have identified. It's also important to recognise that most of the work supported by these resources happens before an emergency occurs. The toolkit is intended to help you do the thinking and preparation in advance. So whether that is reviewing plans, preparing critical information, strengthening communication pathways, clarifying responsibilities, building relationships, or testing arrangements through exercises. So this means that when an incident does occur, you're not trying to develop those arrangements under pressure. You have information, processes, and resources already prepared that can support decision-making and coordination during the response. If we use our example from the maturity assessment, collaboration scored 33% and received a good maturity rating, making it one of the organisation's clearest opportunities for improvement. So rather than looking at that result and thinking we need to improve collaboration as a broad objective, the toolkit helps translate that finding into something practical. We can come to the collaboration domain here and see the specific resources available to support improvement, such as preparing critical building information, strengthening emergency communications, and improving internal handover arrangements. But that doesn't mean that the organisation should focus exclusively on collaboration. Emergency preparedness is interconnected, and improvement identified in one domain will often lead you into another. Strengthening collaboration may identify a need to update an existing plan, and that updating that plan may identify something that should be exercised, and an exercise may then identify further opportunities for improvement. So while the maturity assessment tool helps you decide where to start, the toolkit allows you to move between the domains according to what your organisation actually needs. And importantly, this isn't a one-off process. As capability develops, priorities may change. Organisations can return to the assessment, review their progress, and continue using different tools, resources over time. That's really how the toolkit is intended to work. So assess where you are, identify what matters most, select the resources that will help, put them into practice, and continue to improve. To show you what that can look like in a real organisational setting, we're now going to bring all of it together through a fictional example. So I'll preface that this is a fictional but realistic scenario that demonstrates how a commercial building could use the toolkit in practice. I'd like you to meet Harbourview Tower, a 30-storey commercial office building in the Sydney CBD. The building is home to around 2,400 occupants across 12 commercial tenants and, like many buildings in the CBD, sits alongside major transport hubs and busy public spaces. While Harbourview Tower already has emergency plans, trained wardens, and regular evacuation exercises, effective emergency preparedness relies on far more than documentation alone. It depends on the people responsible for managing emergencies, working together, building management, facilities, security, and tenant representatives, each clearly with defined roles and responsibilities. So before making any improvements, the team decides to complete the Emergency Preparedness Maturity Assessment to better understand their current capability and identify where they should focus their efforts. Let's see what the assessment tells them. So the assessment shows the building has an overall maturity rating of better, demonstrating that many of the fundamental elements of emergency preparedness are already in place. Governance, training, and continuous improvement are all areas of strength, reflecting established processes, regular training, and a commitment to ongoing improvement. However, the assessment also highlights where the greatest opportunities for improvement exist. Collaboration receives the lowest maturity score, indicating there is value in strengthening coordination between building management, tenants, neighbouring organisations, and emergency services. Planning also presents opportunities to review existing arrangements, broaden hazard planning, and ensure emergency documentation remains current and practical. Exercising is another priority. While evacuation drills occur regularly, the team recognises the need to test more complex scenarios involving decision-making, communication, and coordination. Rather than trying to improve everything at once, the emergency management team uses these assessment results to identify the toolkit resources that best address these priority capability areas. Let's see how they put the resources into practice. So as we mentioned, the maturity assessment identified collaboration as one of Harbourview Tower's highest priority areas for improvement. Rather than trying to address everything at once, the team has used the collaboration section of the toolkit to focus on the gaps identified through the assessment. One of the first actions was completing the Facility Critical Information for Emergency Services resource. This brought key building information together in one place so it could be accessed and shared quickly if an incident occurred. The team also used the emergency message template to prepare consistent messages in advance. That meant that they would not need to draft communications from scratch during a fast-moving incident, helping reduce confusion and provide clearer information to tenants and other stakeholders. They then strengthened their internal handover arrangements so that important information could be transferred more effectively between teams, shifts, or during an escalating incident. So individually, these are relatively practical changes. Together, they strengthen the organisation's ability to share accurate information, communicate consistently, and coordinate more effectively with tenants, internal teams, and emergency services. Something to note is that Harbourview Tower didn't need to implement the whole toolkit. The assessment identified a priority. The toolkit gave them the practical resources to address that priority in a focused and achievable way. So exercising was another priority identified through Harbourview Tower's maturity assessment. The building already conducted regular evacuation drills, but the assessment showed that this was only testing one type of emergency response. The team recognised an opportunity to broaden exercising so they could test communication, coordination, and decision-making across a wider range of scenarios. Using the toolkit, Harbourview Tower planned a discussion-based exercise around one of its priority risks and set clear objectives for what the team wanted to validate. They also used the exercise to test emergency communications and coordination arrangements rather than focusing only on operational response. Following the exercise, the teams captured observations, identified areas for improvement, and assigned follow-up actions so that the lessons translated into practical changes. The benefit was greater confidence that the building's plans and communication arrangements had actually been tested. and that the people responsible for implementing them have already had an opportunity to practice working together. So this is an important shift from simply conducting an exercise to using exercising deliberately to validate arrangements, identify gaps, and build confidence before an emergency occurs. Planning was the third priority identified through Harbour View Tower's maturity assessment. The building already had emergency plans in place, but these were largely centred on traditional fire and evacuation scenarios. The assessment highlighted an opportunity to broaden that planning and consider a wider range of incidents that could affect building operations. Using the planning resources within the toolkit, the team reviewed what they already had and identified where existing arrangements could be strengthened. They considered risks such as severe weather, shelter-in-place situations, prolonged disruption, and the potential loss of normal communication systems. They also worked through decision triggers, contingency arrangements, and recovery considerations so that more of the thinking was done before an incident occurred. Importantly, the toolkit wasn't asking Harbour View Tower to replace its existing plans or start again. It helped the team build on what was already in place and make those arrangements more comprehensive, practical, and relevant to a broader range of emergencies. By this point, Harbour View Tower has now strengthened 3 priority areas identified through the assessment: collaboration, exercising, and planning. And over the following 6 months, the team embedded those improvements into its emergency management arrangements. Then those arrangements were put to the test. So 6 months later, Harbour View Tower experiences a severe storm affecting the CBD. The impacts begin to build quickly. There are localised power interruptions, water ingress into the basement, and lift disruptions. At the same time, the building team is dealing with a high volume of tenant inquiries, while emergency services are responding to multiple incidents across the CBD. It is exactly the kind of situation where information can be incomplete, priorities can change quickly, and building management may need to make decisions before the broader situation is fully understood. The important difference for Harbour View Tower is that the emergency management team is not starting from scratch. Over the previous 6 months, they have already worked through the priority areas identified in their maturity assessment. They have strengthened their planning, improved communication and coordination arrangements, and tested key processes through exercising. That preparation means the team has clearer roles, better information available, more consistent communication pathways, and greater familiarity with how they will work together under pressure. It also means that they are not trying to create plans, draft messages, or clarify responsibilities in the middle of an incident. So much of that work has already been done. The situation is still challenging, and the toolkit does not remove the complexity of the emergency. What it does is help the organisation enter the incident with stronger arrangements already in place. So this is where we can start to see the value of preparedness built in advance. On the next slide, we'll look at how these improvements in planning, collaboration, and exercising support the team's response as the incident unfolds. So this is where we can really see the benefit of implementing the toolkit. Harbour View Towers hasn't eliminated the emergency. The storm is still complex, conditions are changing, and emergency services are stretched, What has changed is the organisation's ability to manage it. Through planning, the team has stronger arrangements already in place to guide decisions as the situation evolves. So rather than developing a response under pressure, they can draw on work they have already completed. Through collaboration, critical information and communication pathways have been established in advance. The team can communicate more consistently with tenants, coordinate with contractors, and provide relevant information to emergency services when it is needed. And through exercising, those arrangements aren't just sitting on paper. The team has practiced how they will work together, tested their communications, and identified improvements before being faced with a real incident. The result is a team that is better informed, more confident, and better coordinated when it matters most. And importantly, Harbourview Tower didn't have to implement the entire toolkit to achieve that. They used the maturity assessment to identify their priorities, selected the resources most relevant to those priorities, and built capability progressively over time. The real benefit of the toolkit: it turns preparedness into practical action, helping organisations do the work before an emergency so their people, plans, and processes are better positioned to perform when an incident occurs. And as capability grows, organisations can continue returning to the toolkit, addressing new priorities, and strengthening preparedness over time. So that brings us to the end of our fictional scenario. We'd now like to invite organisations to be part of the next phase of the project by putting the toolkit into practice within their own environment. This isn't something we expect you to do on your own. We'll work with participating organisations and provide guidance and support throughout the implementation. What we're particularly interested in is the real-world experience, how you use the toolkit, what worked well, where you encountered challenges, and what you learned along the way. We'll capture those experiences and develop them into practical case studies that can be shared across the sector. Those case studies will also form an important part of our next masterclass, where we'll come back together and look at how the toolkit has been applied in practice. So if your organisation is interested in participating, we'd really encourage you to get in touch. My email address is on the screen, and we'll be very happy to talk you through what involvement could look like. So as we wrap up today, I'd like to briefly highlight what comes next. Today's masterclass marks the beginning of the implementation phase. Over the coming months, we'll support organisations putting the toolkit into practice, capture the lessons that emerge, and bring those insights together through the final project report. We'll also return for a follow-up masterclass in February, where we'll share practical experiences and learnings from implementation. We hope today has demonstrated that strengthening emergency preparedness doesn't need to happen all at once. Start with the maturity assessment, identify your priorities, and use the toolkit resources to progressively build capability over time. And as a final reminder, if your organisation is interested in participating in the case study phase, please reach out to myself at sharris@resilienceservices.com.au, and we'd be very pleased to work with you. We have finished with a little bit of time, so I'm going to confirm if we have any questions for the Q&A.
Yeah, so we do have one question, Sammy, and one of our participants has asked if this is only being rolled out across Sydney or if it's for a national implementation. Now, just so you know, this has been designed in partnership with Sydney City and the Better Buildings project, but it's been designed where it could be used across the board. So it's not a mandatory thing, but all of the and international standards, and we've used our expertise and Ariana's as well, and emergency services, to create the templates that are available on the Better Buildings Project's website. So it's free to anyone who would like to implement it, but you don't have to be part of Sydney. And if you do want to be part of the case study, wherever you are, please get in touch. We'd happily have you on board as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brie. While we do have time, does anyone else have any questions that we'd like answered while we're here online? So we'll check our chat. Okay. Well, on behalf of Resilience Services and City of Sydney and the Better Buildings Partnership, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Oh, sorry, Brett.
Thank you. Fabulous. Thanks, Rebecca. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you.
Matt Williams, we can see you've got your hand up there. Did you want to post a question into the chat?
Oh, will there be a resource for residential buildings too? Is Matt's question.
So, Matt, in terms of residential buildings, I'm assuming you're meaning as sort of not as a resident yourself, but as either a building facilities manager or someone who works in the industry. So this would be applicable across residential buildings as well. So your sort of high rise and things like that would definitely fall under this. So these are definitely available and can be utilised by residential buildings as well as commercial. We see them as commercial as they are for building, for, you know, they do have that aspect of coordination required.
Thank you. Oh, Matt's also asked, how do body corporates interact in that scenario?
Matt, that's a very interesting question and probably not something we're going to be able to answer quickly without a bit of back and forth here. So potentially, so that we can better understand exactly what information you're after and how we can assist you, I might refer that one to Sammy. If you can get in touch via email with Sammy, we did post her email in the chat as well. Sammy will follow up with you and we'll figure out exactly what it is you're after and see how we can assist.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay. Doesn't look like any further questions are coming through.
So might be a good opportunity to end the event. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.